Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations in Horror. I am your host, Kevin L. Powers. I'm also the festival director and program director for Something Wicked Film Festival and Events, and welcome to our program today. Now, today, we are still getting into a lot of different types of horror films. If you've been following us for the last few weeks or even the last couple months, we've been trying to delve as much as possible into different types of genres of the horror film and get back to some of the more classic things. But today we are doing a much more recent horror film, which we don't do a lot of. But this was one that I thought that we needed to delve into because my initial interpretation of the movie was flawed, to say the least. And then it became a much better film once I had been enlightened. The movie we're going to be talking about today is James Wan's Malignant. And to join me on this conversation is Sarah Panazzo, who has been on the show many times before. And we had a conversation before I actually saw the movie a long time ago when it was a release. And I hated this movie and she enjoyed this movie. But now, after time and the fact that I did a little bit more research or did a little bit more reading, I have a different outlook on the film, and I'm so glad that we'll be able to address it now. Thank you, Panazzo, for joining us on the show today.
Yeah, I'm just gonna warn everybody right now, we're gonna spoil the shit out of this movie, but I think it makes it better because it's two completely different movies watching it the first time and then going in the second time and realizing how genius this entire film is.
I am going to agree with her. So, in order for us to better be able to have a good conversation about this film, there has to be spoilers. So, if you are someone out there who has never seen the film and doesn't want to be spoiled, then don't listen to this episode. But if you are perfectly fine with spoilers, then go ahead and listen ahead. All right, Panazzo. Because I want to get your initial reactions and outlooks out the way first, kind of tell everyone a little bit about your experience or your first experience with James Wan's *Malignant*.
So this was released 21 during COVID. So theaters still weren't super active. This is when HBO started doing its straight to streaming releases. So this didn't do very good at the box office, but it had, once word spread about the movie, it was like wildfire and it was so freaking popular. They would have made a ton of money at the box office with this. The trailers did not reveal a thing, I want to say. It was very, you're watching it and you're like, okay, this could be a very entertaining like horror movie. Okay, it's going to be James Wan. It's going to be like The Nun. It's going to be like Annabelle. It's going to be like The Conjuring and Insidious, where he's got his style of movies that you are used to, that are very formulaic. You're used to the same kind of jump scares, etc., etc. And we decided to watch this movie and are like all the lights off in the house because it can be very dark in the movie. And I was dying most of the movie. This movie comes off as so ridiculous and campy. There are so many one-liners and just things that happen that are just hysterical. And you're like, what movie is this? Because it's got his brilliant shots. It's got all this like dark, scary stuff, jump scares. And then you get to the twist and you're like, this is freaking insane. And it is one of the biggest what the fuck movies I have ever seen. And for even people who didn't like this movie, you had to talk about it. Which is how I brought you into it, Kevin, because
Yes.
I know you were like, I don't want to see this. It's just another one of these, and you didn't really like it. And then it was like, oh no.
So when I saw this movie originally, I've seen every, with the exception of his Aquaman movies, I've seen every James Wan movie at the theater. I'm a huge fan of his from all the way back in the Saw days, and so I've always been a person who followed him and watched all of his films. I've seen all the Conjuring, the Insidious, I've seen every Saw movie at the theater, by the way. I've seen them. I'm a big and Dead Silence, which now after rewatching this film is the closest in tone
Yes.
movie that he's ever done to this one. And unfortunately, no one seems to have seen Dead Silence other than me. It's got
No, I
totally,
saw that one in theaters and it creeped me out because I hate puppets.
but no one else saw that movie at the theater.
I know.
It's sad. It's sad because Dead Silence was always one of my favorite films of his, which is why I could not understand how I did not like this film originally. I think my brain had been rewired so much to his type of style from Insidious and the Conjuring films that I was expecting that with this,
Yes.
because you are absolutely right. The trailer doesn't reveal anything for this movie. So when I walked in, I was expecting something closer to Insidious or the Conjuring movies. And when I walked out, I was like, what the fuck is this shit that I just watched? This piece of shit movie sucks.
And
And I
most
was
of the
like,
internet agreed with you.
but it was so bad shit crazy. I think my brain was wired the wrong way when I saw this. I think this is one of those films where the trailer is wrong. It's
Yes.
a horrible trailer and it doesn't set up the audience for the type of experience they're going to go watch.
But I think that's better because we look at like what happened with Barbarian and what those trailers set up, and it can be super genius like that.
Yeah, but I don't think the trailer for Malignant set up the tone right. My tone going like if I had seen the trailer and thought, oh, Dead Silence, oh, and I think it also could be because he was doing this in between his Aquaman films, and I really hated Aquaman.
Yeah.
It was like that movie. Like I just really hated that movie, and I kind of got from *Malignant* that he was kind of adding a sense of humor to it that he had learned from working on the Aquaman films, the first one, anyways. I hated Aquaman, not because of what he did, but I hated the fact that that movie relied on too much CGI
Yes.
for everything, and so it took me out of the movie. But the one thing I did recognize when I saw *Malignant* that I did enjoy when I first saw it is I loved the matte paintings and the CGI backdrops that made it look like an old Gothic movie. And I
Yes.
loved the fucking score. The score is I freaking love the score. I loved it even more when I rewatched the movie. I thought with the mindset changed,
Hmm.
I actually got that the music was perfect for the movie. When I first watched the movie, I kind of said, okay, the music is great. I just didn't care for the movie. But the second time I watched it, on your suggestion and I actually reading stuff, I thought that the fucking music was even more brilliant now with the tone that is in the movie than it was the first time I saw it. And this is one of those rare times where I think that the movie on the second watch far exceeds my experience of the first watch. Um, and I have to thank you for that. Part of that is you. I would have never given this movie a second fucking time. I saw it once. I was said I'm done. I don't need to watch it again. I hated it, and I would have never seen it again. But you're prompting.
But I mean, so I did do a ton of research on this because at the time I remember everybody being up in arms about, oh my God, it was absolute trash. Oh my God, it was
It
amazing.
was.
And going back now, a lot of people have the same tone as you, as like I rewatched it and I now see that it's brilliant. James Wan even had to come out and I wrote down his quote. I don't know how anyone can think that *Malignant* was made from a self-serious perspective. It's so aware of what it is. I knew that I probably wouldn't get the opportunity to do something like this often in my career. I was aware of people's perception of me and the movies I've made. I wanted to take that perception and turn it on its head. And it was a lot of just me having fun. And 100%, because you get his cinematography is beautiful. It's very unnerving. You get these beautiful wide shots with these open spaces in the background that are just haunting. Like you get the long look down the dark tunnel waiting for a figure to appear. You get the look outside underneath the flickering light on the street. And there's so much of that in this movie that makes it so unnerving that when the twist itself happens, it literally turns it on its head.
Yeah. I will agree with you 100%. I mean that shot of the main character's sister when she's driving up to the insane asylum during the daylight,
Yes.
seeing it in light. That whole sequence. I mean, there's some amazing shots in this movie, and I think I was just not in the mood when I originally saw it. But I needed that reevaluation. That quote is the same quote I was about to say too,
Yes.
because that quote is what changed my perspective on this movie. I almost wish that he had made this fucking movie around in the 80s, because if he was, I had probably seen it 200 times.
Well, I've got some fun facts about that too, Kevin.
See, I know
We'll
you
get
did
there
some.
though.
Oh, okay. So that's the thing is, in the when I was growing up, I loved these type of movies, the batshit crazy movies, and I've said this time and time again on the show. Batshit type crazy movies, I would rewatch over and over and over again. I would never be that guy who watched the normal type of sci-fi, horror, fantasy, any of those type of genre films. I would never be the guy who watched that normal one over and over again. I always gravitated towards the strange ones, the ones that no one saw when they originally were at the theaters, but then gravitated towards them as cult films. Everything from Big Trouble in Little China to The Monster Squad to Night of the Comet, the odd movies out there. I gravitated towards as a kid, and I saw them a billion times. I believe that this film would have been one of those films that I would have watched a billion times as a kid, but me being older when it came out, my expectations were colored. And it didn't allow me to enjoy it as much as I wish I did when I saw it at theater.
But 100% now, this is what that movie is going to be in 20, 30 years.
Yeah,
Like, this is already a cult film. Going back and rewatching it is insane. I was going to say with the cinematography, one of my favorite sequences is her running through the house, and they've just got the top down of her running from room to room and then upstairs. And I think it's brilliantly done. But there is so much that this goes into. So I'm gonna kind of start with the fact that he was influenced by Argento, and
hmm
he listed three specific movies, which I don't know if you've seen.
I've seen every one of them, so you could say them all.
So the main one that he focused on was Tenebrae,
Tenebrae, yeah.
Tenebrae, and then
Hey,
Phenomena and Trauma are the other two. But
phenomenal.
Tenebrae is the one that this is like mostly focused on. And when I started looking at this movie more as uh giallos, is that how
Yeah,
you say? Giallo?
yeah.
Yeah, where it's like the murder mystery, there's
Huh?
the slasher psych horror. It makes so much sense, and it is effectively a love letter to those older movies.
You are
With the
correct.
way he colors it, with the way it's shot, it's brilliant. And for somebody like him, who everybody is expecting the typical version of him, it was just a brand new experience because he could show something that he apparently loves very much. Um, and he doesn't get to make very often.
No one gets to make that very often, not even Dario Argento anymore. But when I looked at it from that perspective, because those are the movies that I may have read the same thing now. That's exactly why I enjoyed it more, is because I realized what he was referencing. I was like, holy shit, those are some of my favorite Argento films. How did I not pick up on this? He just has a bigger budget and a much more like he is making what Argento wished he could make in this day and age, but was only able to make in the 80s when the Italian cinema was huge. Italian cinema, unfortunately, is not huge anymore. And so Dario Argento is not able to flourish as well as he used to. But James Wan created a modern day fucking
Yes.
Giallo by his inspirations from those 80s giallo movies, and it works perfectly. Anyone who out there who listens who actually loves giallo films like I have will pick up on these. Now that we're saying it, I did not pick up on these when I first saw the movie. If I had, I would have enjoyed the movie immensely more. Tenebrae and Phenomenon are two of my favorites, and Trauma just happens to be the very first Dario Argento film I ever saw. Uh, when I saw that one, I had to go back and start finding all the other movies that he had done because I'd never heard of them before that movie. So that's why I'm so familiar with this now, and I get the movie now, is because I had to read about it. I was like, I didn't know any of this beforehand, and I see
Yeah.
it.
I mean, even looking at the poster, I'm like, oh no, 100%. That's totally Italian cinema right there. Like, like I said, the coloring, especially where he had those bright reds throughout the entire movie, it's shocking. Um, but a lot of people also compared it to The Dark Half by Stephen King because it's a
Yeah.
very similar story. But going off of that, I found out that Juan's wife actually co-wrote this with him, because she is fascinated with medical anomalies, and they actually got this from Edward Mordrake, or Mordrake. I don't know if you were ever aware of this in like psychology. It's kind of an urban legend, like it hasn't been 100% confirmed, but in the 19th century, there was this guy who had a face on the back of his head, and it would whisper, it would laugh, it would cry. He would beg people to remove it. He said it whispered bad things to him at night, and the guy ended up committing suicide when he was 23. And it is actually one of the first like written down versions of having a parasitic twin,
Oh.
which is essentially what this movie is based on. So a lot of I mean, you get parasitic twins where they'll eat each other in the womb or whatever, and sometimes you end up getting like teratomas, which is what this is, and they actually spell all of this out in the opening credit sequence. All of the stuff in the background is all real medical terms that describe exactly what is happening to her. I mean, most teratomas are benign, but they can be malignant. And they fully form tissue, teeth, hair, bone, muscle. It's disgusting. And as soon as my husband and I figured out what was going on with this movie, because we were like, wait a second, is this what's going on? We sat there just making Arnold impressions, going, "It's not a tumor," over and over and over again. Because yeah, this is a real thing that happens. It's like craniopagus parasiticus is when the two skulls join together. So there is like the scientific thing. There are some of the symptoms that she mentioned, but yeah, it's quite a weird thing that
Mhm.
happens in the real world, compared to some of the other movies we've been talking about recently that are also happening in the real world. But it's such an interesting take of like the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. And I mean,
I
just the
just, I,
whole,
you're just mentioning it now, but you're absolutely right. The whole, even you have the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde reference, but you also have a little bit of medical science trying to control another person, and you have that little bit of Frankenstein's monster in there. And
yes.
I didn't think about any of that until right now and last night when I was rewatching the film. Because you're right. The opening credit sequence spells out a lot of it for you, but when I originally watched this, that's not what I was expecting the film was being about. So I kind of forgot about the credit sequence until I
Yeah.
watched it. When I rewatched it, I was like, "Holy shit! Yeah, there's a lot
It,
of force. I should have been paying attention
yeah.
to this, but I wasn't the first time I saw it."
Well,
Uh,
and like with the whole opening scene of like the violence and people's like arms being bent backward, and then you've got the whole Voldemort thing in the back of the head. And I think that's when I was like, hey, look, it's Voldemort. And I was like, wait a second. What what if?
oh, did you really think about see?
Because as soon as they showed the face, it was like it looks like Voldemort's face on the back of the head in Sorcerer's Stone, where he takes it off and it's like all deformed and whatever. And I was like, that's weird. But yeah, that was the first thing I said is I was like, look, it's Voldemort. And then as the movie progressed, I was like, oh God. Oh no.
Oh my God. Well, see, you saw some of that earlier than I did because I didn't think about any of that until just now.
Well, and then going back and watching it, like you start seeing the stuff where, like, okay, so her husband abuses her, and later on they spell everything out for you, where like they shut Gabriel inside her skull. They cut off as much of it as they could, which was the whole opening credits, and everything they couldn't remove just got stuffed in there. And when she hit her head, uh, released him. And so every time there was an attack, her head would start bleeding again. And then we started watching, and I think it was the second killing, uh, I mean, or the second doctor killing, not the second killing in the movie, where we paused it for a second. We were like, that person is backwards. And the contortion of the body in this movie is incredible.
It is. I thought it was batshit crazy the first time I saw it. I was like, this is fucking
Yes.
weird.
Well,
I
and like they've done it before in movies where they've had people walk backwards and then they've reversed it in the film so they're walking forwards and it looks really creepy. It's like a really common effect to make things seem odd. Or they've had people do things backwards. Uh so it's not the first time I've seen like the effect, especially when it comes to like creature features. Like I think Del Toro does it a lot with his monster movies as well. Like when they did Mama, I believe that's another one that used that. But contortionists are very popular as monsters right now because they can do so much weird stuff with their bodies. And I mean, noticing that the hands were backwards and the
yeah.
feet were backwards, and it's like, wait a second. This is like, I mean, the first time we were laughing our asses off. We were like, this is beyond ridiculous. What the hell am I watching? But then once you realize it and you're like, okay, this is freaking genius.
Yeah, well, that's why I said I had to rewatch it because the first time I watched it, I was like, what the fuck am I watching? This is so weird. The second time, and we've already discussed a little bit about the whole sequence in the police department.
Oh my God.
That sequence is absolutely brilliant, and it showcases everything that we're talking about now so brilliantly well. Uh,
Yes.
but I don't want to jump too much into that. Yeah,
Yeah. Not yet, but no, like throughout the movie, they hint at it the entire
they
time. Like her
do.
husband's kill, his head gets flipped around 180 right away. And it's like, I didn't pick that up until this last time I watched it. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah,
But
I
then,
did that
like,
too. I said, oh shit.
whenever she's talking on the phone to him, the back of her head is always in the mirror. Or like every time we've seen him from somebody else's perspective, it's like a flicker in a mirror or a window. Um, all showcasing that it is a reflection. And she makes a lot of comments about it's all in my head. It's just happening in there. It's not real. And it is in the back of your head.
Yes, I didn't pick up on those either. I did pick up on a lot of this stuff yesterday when I rewatched it, and so um, that makes for a much more enjoyable experience when you know some of this beforehand. The reason why we're not doing a spoilers free talk or conversation about this is because someone like me, who I first watched it, I didn't like this movie at all, but after I did the research and read a little bit more about it, and got some, I think the main thing for me is that James Wan said exactly what type of movie he was making, and he referenced giallo films, which I absolutely love, and he referenced Dario Argento's, which are the best in my opinion. There are some Mario Bava, maybe the best, but Dario Argento took what he learned from Mario Bava's style and elevated it to something that no one else has been able to elevate it to since then. So it's great to see that someone in the modern age is taking those same type of aesthetics and applying them to a modern day film. There has been other people trying to attempt this, and of course, Dario Argento tried to attempt it himself with his own film called Giallo. But that one was not nearly as successful as this film, I believe, has been. And I think this one will be, like you said, a cult favorite that will last time more so than Juan's Dead Silence. That's a smaller cult film. People keep telling me there's a cult surrounding that movie. I've not heard anyone talk about Dead Silence.
Never. I think it still has one of the best twists at the end of the movie, and it's creepy and disgusting.
Yeah.
But I remember being horrified by that movie when it first came out, and I still think about that from time to time. So it's not just cute, Kevin.
Yeah, well, I love the movie, but this movie here, I do believe audiences are gaining. I think this movie is gaining an audience all its own, and part of that's because when it originally was released, it was during COVID, like we mentioned,
Mhm.
and I think people are now able to find it more, and they're enjoying it more. And I hope that people like me who did not enjoy it the first time around are taking another chance with the movie and seeing some of the amazing stuff that the movie has to offer, not just in terms of the cinematography and production elements, because James Wan is just a genius when it comes to some of that stuff. You can see his progression in each one of the movies he does, including the Aquaman films. But also in terms of the style the comedy and everything else that he throws in there, because it's all something that is, I guess, all everything he did before this movie is culminated to him being able to do this movie. You can see that some of the stuff that he learned in Aquaman is in this movie, even though I hated Aquaman. Some of the stuff that he learned from Dead Silence is in this film. I think that people will enjoy this movie more when time has allowed it. I mean, it's only been a few years, so
Yeah, it hasn't been out very long at all, but I mean, it was ridiculously meme worthy. Like, I don't remember a single day that didn't go by that I saw like 10 new memes based on this movie right after it came out because it's just so funny. Like, the writing is hysterical. I mean, you've got the two cops that play off like Law and Order SVU
yeah.
with discount Wanda Sykes making the same comments Ice-T would make. Like, she literally comes into an autopsy like, I can't remember if it was a sucker or a popsicle. And just the jokes she's making and the comments that are made throughout the movie.
Yeah.
Like, the guy walks in, he goes, well, when's she gonna wake up? And the doctor's like, sir, she's in a coma. Well, I mean, and then you've got this giant, big ass industrial fan in the hideout
Yeah.
of Gabriel, and you're like, where is this? And then she falls out of the attic of the house.
I was like, man, which brings the point that you bring the production design for this. Every set, every location is fucking amazing.
Yes.
And so much detail is in this film that you aren't expecting in this type of horror film. I think, Juan, having worked on such bigger films, took a
Yes.
lot of time and effort putting together his team for this smaller film, which are probably on the budget, but still looks amazing.
Yeah, because I mean even the VFX where it like melts down and melts back up as she's dreaming about each kill is really well done. It's very creepy. The magical face twists where she's brushing her teeth, spits out her toothpaste, and then looks up and she's one of the victims. Or like when she's putting the laundry away and the woman's face is just in the door of the washing machine. It's all really well done. It's really well shot and acted. Everybody plays this movie 100% straight, except for the cops almost. They are very clearly a parody.
Fair parody. And and I'm gonna bring this up a little early, I guess. But the sequence in the police station, which reminded me so much of the police sequence in Terminator, it was ridiculous.
I mean, the choreography in general for this movie is phenomenal.
Not just both the cinematography and choreography for this sequence. I will say sequence,
Yes.
because it starts off in a jail cell with all the other female inmates and just gets bigger from there.
Yes. And
And
it's at that moment where you're like finding everything out at once
mhm.
and you're like putting the pieces together, you're waiting for the bass to drop, and then all of a sudden it does, and it's a freaking explosion in there. I really appreciated Zoe Bell being in this scene because I love her as a stunt woman.
So do I.
But oh my God. This is where like I watching the movie, like we would laugh ridiculously at like what the hell are we watching? We got to this point and I was dying because between the really bad face mask of her face on the back of the head, but then the ridiculousness of this choreography and the way it's shot, it's almost like a John Wick movie.
You you know what? I could see that now. It is the way that it's both filmed and the way it is executed. Before John Wick, this was more of I'm only seeing this now, the second time, because the first time when they do the big reveal with Gabriel, I was just so like mind blown. What the fuck am I watching? That I kind of missed out on how great a sequence this all was. And I didn't realize Zoe Bell was in it the first time. I did last night. I was like, holy shit!
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I was distracted when I
Yes.
first saw this when I first saw the movie, and I wasn't distracted anymore. And I started to realize, holy crap, the way the camera moves in this to cover the choreography with the fight sequence is simply amazing.
It
Um,
really is.
the gore effects of Gabriel killing everybody, especially or the very first sequence when Gabriel reveals himself to everybody.
And
It's
just, yeah, she's just ripping her hair open and the skull cracks and then the eye starts moving. And it's like, this is disgusting.
It is, and it works really well because at that point, Gabriel is he is the her dark half, as you've already mentioned,
Yes.
dark half. But this was like to the extreme. And the thing is that that whole sequence is amazing, but when she goes into the lockup to or when Gabriel goes into the lockup to get his outfit. He's got to put
Yes.
the outfit on and he puts on the gloves. That's why I started seeing more of the Giallo stuff because if you're not familiar with Giallo, it's all about the killer having the black gloves and always, we see Gabriel with the black gloves all the time, but I didn't get that when I first saw the film. I started to pick up on all this stuff last night when I was rewatching the film. I was like, holy shit, James Wan, you're a brilliant fucker. I'm gonna.
Yeah, because like there was like the whole like black greasy hair thing that I was like, okay, this is iconic. Like it's the black trench coat, the black gloves. I just missing like a black hat or something. And then when she opens up her head, I'm like, oh, it all makes sense. That's like the blood and stuff in the hair.
Yeah.
And it's
it's a little disturbing, but once she starts or Gabriel starts that next fight with the police officers,
oh my God.
all hell breaks loose. It's that choreography, even with the bumbling cops added
Yes.
in, is still quite amazing.
It's like watching The Matrix for the first time where he does the back bend and you're like, this is peak cinema right now. This is an iconic shot right here that people are going to be talking about for years. And I think most of it is due to the chair yeet, which is probably my favorite, where he just like sharp shoots them across the room with an entire freaking chair.
That was hilarious as shit. I didn't remember that till I rewatched it. I was like, oh yeah, that does happen, and I was laughing my ass off. Now I was like, holy shit! it was and it's not just that one little sequence. There's tons of sequences like that throughout the whole sequence, in which Gabriel just seems like to be the John Wick of slasher giallo killers. Like if there was ever a list of the most iconic and effective giallo killers, Gabriel would be at the very top of the list.
Well, and it's like also because he's doing everything with a backwards body. Which like I love when he like does his power up sequence where he like shakes out his arms and you hear everything crack so it can turn the opposite direction. And then like just going back to some of the other kills and escape scenes, watching him run away where it's somebody running backwards and it looks ridiculous, but technically it's amazing to watch.
Yeah, because Gabriel is like a fucking monkey on everything. He just climbs, jumps, and yeah, he could do anything, which makes for a very interesting sequence for the rest of the film because he seems unstoppable.
Yeah, and it's also really interesting because the two main contortionists they used for the film actually did all that stuff. The stuff that they were doing is stuff that is really done by contortionists. Like they can bend their bodies that way. I mean, I think the only like not real thing was him jumping out the window and going down the stairs, but everything else was practically done with them. I mean, that fight scene, what was her name? Martina Mazeppa. She performed all the backward scenes and she wore an animatronic on the back of her head of Gabriel's face the entire time too.
Oh wow.
Yeah, like they went this was James Wan, I think he said his first major film with animatronics. And because he used him a little bit in one of his other movies, but he said this was a huge part of it because Gabriel's in so many scenes. But looking at it from that perspective of, oh, that's actually somebody doing this fight scene with an animatronic on them in most of the scenes and wearing a really ridiculous plastic rubber mask. of the actress's face. It's really impressive.
Oh, I didn't know any of that. That had to, yeah. I bet you that's probably one of the, yeah. Pro, it, that brings the, like early Argento films where he did extremely complicated camera shots. And now, of course, he can't do those anymore, unfortunately. But his stuff that he used to do in opera and Suspiria was all complicated, that he just can't do anymore. And that used to be a hallmark of Giallo films. They just weren't, the kills themselves were part of the aesthetic of the film. And it's the same with this one. He has his iconic Gabriel has that iconic killing apparatus that he's I forget what they called it that he's crafted.
Oh, the weapon.
Yeah, I can't remember what it's called.
It's her like award that's shown in the opening scene too. Uh
So yeah, if
it's
you want,
so gruesome.
it is gruesome, but this one hell of a weapon. He throws it across and kills people a couple times in the movie.
Yeah.
He's very effective with that weapon that he's crafted himself.
He
Uh,
really is a killing machine. I know he's been in like his dark space or whatever, in like the nether, in between the nothingness, that he could like train and do whatever with his body because apparently he was practicing.
Yeah. And so that brings us to some of the other things about the film. We've talked about the giallo aspects, and we've talked about some of the definitely the cinematography and choreography, especially in that last sequence. I do believe that when discussing this film, someone who has never seen a giallo film before also could be colored by how odd this movie actually is. Uh, but I think that this film requires a little bit of that for you to actually enjoy all the aspects that James Wan brought to the movie. I do think that without having some type of background for this movie or some type of, I guess, review, or I don't know what the best word is because
Having some background information in general, I think, just kind of helps because, like, knowing what the twist is and going and expecting and seeing the way he shoots things, where it's like she's laying on the bed and he rises from the back of her head behind her as he's about to kill somebody, like, it becomes a whole lot more meaningful. A lot
yeah.
of the throwaway lines are a lot more meaningful. It's not just a bad script about putting out a bolo on sloth from the Goonies. I mean, it's there's some really genius stuff written in there that is just hidden in. I mean, the whole birthday cake scene is a genius scene. The kid talking on the phone, the like little kid's phone that like if it rings, you answer it. Not in this movie, you don't.
I think that one of the things about this film that it needs to be said and said several times is that it's more enjoyable on repeat viewing. There are some films where you can watch it once and when you rewatch it, it's just simply for entertainment value. I think this film rewards people who watch it more than once. I think James Wan was able to craft a lot of different elements in the film, and even if I didn't know about the giallo aspects, I would have known on the second viewing about what he was going for in regards to having a fun horror movie that was more extreme than anything he'd ever done before then. And you have to go in knowing that you can have fun with this movie, but it's James Wan, so it's actually going to have a little meaning to it as well. And you'll be rewarded on a repeat viewings with this film. This is not Friday the 13th knockoff, where there's no repeat rewardingness when you rewatch Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th is pretty much what you get every time you watch it. There is no deep meaning to that movie whatsoever, but people do rewatch it over and over and over again. Despite that, I think with *Malignant*, James Wan's crafted a film that when you rewatch it, you're rewarded as a viewer. If you read about it, then you rewatch it, you're rewarded even more. And the more that you learn about the film, the more you enjoy the film, which is very rare with a lot of horror films in this day and age. And I have to commend them for trying that with this film.
Yeah, I mean, rewatching it, like it's a very funny movie. It can be very dark.
Mhm.
I mean, they go through the whole sequence of her having multiple miscarriages
It
because
is dark.
Gabriel is essentially eating them and
Hmm.
feeding off of them, which reminded me of what's her name, who used to bathe herself in the blood of children.
Oh,
Um,
that Elizabeth
yes.
Bathory.
Yeah, so there's like a lot of that stuff, but this is also, it has a really interesting take that he doesn't hit too hard on the head, but it
Mm,
was mentioned a lot in a bunch of the stuff that I read. Was this is right around the time when we started having the Roe versus Wade talks again, and the whole aspect of men controlling a woman's body. And in this movie, he's literally doing that.
mhm.
So there's not like a whole bunch to say about it, but he does put some interesting undertones
Yeah,
throughout the movie, and especially with all the Giallo stuff. I mean, like it's for somebody who likes those movies, they can see them and they can appreciate this
yeah.
movie for what it is doing. It very much is a love letter.
One of the best. If you like giallo movies, this is probably one of the better modern day love letters to that whole genre, which sadly doesn't really exist anymore. Uh,
Yeah.
so Argento and a couple other Italian directors try to revive it every few years. Mm,
Well,
To
and this is why I appreciate directors who have passion projects and actually like, yeah, they have to do a bunch of the shitty movies that they'll put out because they're signed on to whatever company, but then they can go and do a passion project where they're like, this is what I'm interested in. This is the movie I want to make. And when you see that little glimpse of what they really would like to do, is when you get magical movies like this.
So you bring up something that I don't talk enough about with a lot of people, which are passion projects for a lot of directors. We have seen a lot of passion projects come out lately. I think this is probably the most successful for me between Babylon and Horizon and there's so many people who want to do that. I mean, even the upcoming Megalopolis.
Yes.
You have tons of directors who are doing a passion project. But to be honest with you, James Wan has created a multitude of franchises that are still going, and Malignant's a small little just a small little film that he was able to do with, I think Warner Brothers did this, right?
I believe so.
Yeah,
Yes.
so Warner Brothers, yes, I think it was, is the company he currently does a lot of his films with. So New Line Cinema, yes. So I'm glad that they were able to allow him the freedom to do this film, because I don't think that there's anyone else out there that would have been given the opportunity to do this type of film in this day and age with that type of budget. I think that worst case scenario, if someone wanted to do an homage to Giallo films, they'd probably be given $2 million budget, and we'd have I think it was Dark Glasses was Argento's last Giallo movie, which was pretty bad. Argento, if you're listening, I love your work, buddy, but yeah, sorry, buddy. But yeah, you know, this is something that's not been done in a long time. A giallo film that has a bigger budget to do some of the more crazier aspects. Dario Argento was the guy who was able to do a lot of these in the 80s, 70s, and 80s, I guess. But that genre, no one remembers. I mean, had you thought about this genre at all before watching this movie?
Oh
Are you
no, absolutely not.
okay? I had to think. Are you even familiar with the genre?
So I'm familiar with the genre. I think the only one I have ever seen is Suspiria. And that was because the new one came out and I was like, I refuse to watch this one. I'll watch the original. And
Well,
yeah, I know it's not even like the best of them.
it's not really a giallo film either.
Well,
That's a supernatural witch movie,
it
which
pops up on some of the lists though, and
it,
that's why I'm always like,
it shouldn't. But the thing is, the genre was like heavy in the 70s. It was like
yeah.
number one export by Italian horror filmmakers in the 70s and early 80s. And Argento became the king of that because his became more successful than most everyone else. Um, for a while there, he was still doing them until the Hitchcock one, which I can't remember the name of. Do you know Hitchcock, or do you like Hitchcock? It was
Yeah.
not highly memorable, so I can't remember the title, and I've only ever seen
Which
it.
one was it about?
I can't remember. Do
Yeah,
you know?
because I used to watch the I used to watch the box set. You had like Rear Window and the Birds and
Well, no, that's the name of Argento's movie.
oh, gotcha.
He tried to bring them back after Mother Tears, but the problem is that no one gets that whole genre anymore. Oh, do you
Yeah,
like Hitchcock from 2005? So
damn.
the thing is, Dark Glasses is the one he did in 2022 for Shudder of all places. And so, he's trying to bring it back. It just hasn't been successful. Unfortunately, there's not audience out there for this genre anymore. So I think that even if Juan had told people he was making an homage to Giallo films, I don't think it would have gotten any more audience members.
Yeah.
Us older people who grew up watching those films could better appreciate what he was trying to do.
Well, and that's why I think it's kind of making a comeback because they brought a lot of it back out on Shudder. I think this kind of re-sparked that of people saw this, they loved it, and then they were like, "Oh, is this a thing? Is this a new thing? Is this an old thing?" And I mean, it's like you've got decades of movies similar to this that you can go back and watch. So I think it's been kind of a resurgence. Um, but I'll be interested to see if it continues on with more people making them. But yeah, like the passion projects, people will do. Like you see some throwback stuff that is just so well done. And you'll see like these directors like James Wan who they'll put out a bunch of movies and then they're just putting out more and more of the same movies and then they finally have the budget to make what they want. And normally you get some like really beautiful work.
Yeah.
And it's always just very impressive that you're like, okay, this is what this person was holding on to the entire time. Cause like I think it's like Ari Aster and everybody coming out with all of their big movies now that they've hit it with the smaller ones.
Mm-hmm.
They can finally go back and make those giant movies like Beau is Afraid. Um, but yeah, it's so interesting what you can do with a bigger budget. Because honestly, if this was any smaller, I don't think they would have been able to pull it off.
Trying to think of how did in your research, do you see how much this movie was the
Uh,
was?
it was the budget was 40 million. They
Yeah,
only made 34.9 gross. Um,
that
but
worldwide or just because it's a COVID movie, so that could probably be
yes,
worldwide, yeah.
I believe it was worldwide. But at the end of the first month on HBO, it was seen by more than 1.6 million US households.
Yeah.
So if you can imagine two times, maybe three or four times that number based on how many people in a household would actually see it, plus the overseas people who would have watched it in theaters, it could have made a ton of money.
Hmm. Well, yeah, 40 million for a horror film is that middle of the way where
Yeah, nowadays.
it becomes maybe too much, not enough. Who knows? Between all the stuff that Jason Blum produces and all the remakes that everyone else makes, such as the first Omen and the Halloween trilogy and the
Yeah.
Exorcist movies, where the budget's a little bit higher than a normal horror film. They got to make a lot of money to get it back. I'm glad that they gave him at least this amount to put into a passion project. And it wasn't
Yes.
like Babylon, which was a passion project which cost a shit ton of money to make, or to make, or I mean, even what was the other one I mentioned? I'm trying to mention the other one. I don't want to mention Horizon because everyone has different budgets for that one, between 50 million for each film or 100 million. Who the hell knows? We'll find out afterwards. Uh, but Babylon was one of the bigger ones because that was a really expensive movie that did nothing at the box office at all.
Yeah, and it doesn't get like a cult following like this will garner over the next couple years.
Yeah, I think Babylon will be completely forgotten as a blip on, on directors. I think that's Damien's film.
I think so. I can't
Yeah.
remember.
So, I think that will be just one of those films that people forget. There's tons of them. Every director out there at some point, the director who has a major um time, a major period in their career where they are really successful, end up doing a passion project. Some of them do it where it's widely against everything that they've done before, and some of them just do something that's very similar. uh I thank God that James Wan went back to what he did in terms of his earlier films, but added that sense of humor that he now has, because that makes this film a lot more enjoyable than, say, Dead Silence. Dead Silence doesn't have that type of humor in it. It was Dead Silence was more like it's funny that he's doing a film like this, but it still has that Saw type of mentality because
Yes.
early in his career. Whereas this one, you can definitely tell that he's learned a lot having done the Insidious movies and having done the Aquaman movies and the Conjuring movies. That sense of humor that comes out of the characters is very, very present here. Um,
Yeah,
so
because Dead Silence is played very straight, whereas
yeah,
in this one, everybody in this movie says it's time to cut out the cancer
and I love that they repeat that line.
over and over and over again.
Oh man, I was like, dude, I love that so much on the second viewing. I was like, oh my god, this is fucking hilarious, and I don't see how I missed all of this. It's a shame. It really is a shame that, but thankfully, it's only taken me 2 to 3 years to realize this, and it's not been like a whole decade where I've kind of hated the movie because of my first viewing of it. And I was like, I'm not watching that piece of shit movie ever again. Kind of like Zombieland, which I recently rewatched for the show. I still think that's a piece of shit movie. Uh, with a great opening sequence, I still think it's a piece of shit movie. But if you haven't already listened to that podcast, it'll be coming up, and go check it out. On my opinions on Zombieland, not a film I think aged very well or aged at all or whatever. I just never liked it. This movie, on the other hand, is something completely different. I didn't like it when I first saw it. I absolutely think it's a brilliant movie now. I think that James Wan is a filmmaker that understands not only the history of film, but how to, but kind of like the technical requirements of making a good movie. That being said, these are the things that make Malignant a film that's worth watching, worth rewatching, and appreciating. And for both older film goers and film lovers such as myself, but also for newer ones like Panazzo here, who's much younger than me. So that's what I'm saying without saying too much or giving away too much. How about you?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I think this movie is going to be one of those cult classics that people go back to.
Mm-hmm.
Because like we had the whole era of like, okay, you had the black and white horror movies that we then got those remakes in color and everybody trying to do like their version of Swamp Thing, The Blob, etc. And then we see a reemergence again today where you then get like the new Invisible Man and everything. So I think every couple decades we're going to start seeing a lot more of this where we get those 70s and 80s movies that are classics, that we see the similar styles being built into new and interesting things with what we have today versus back then. I did also want to give a quick shout out to the screenplay writers for this because I think they did a phenomenal job. The one guy, JT Petty, actually is a writer for
Mm-hmm.
all of the Outlast video games, which are terrifying. So I think he did a good job with that. And he was also the director and screenwriter for the Burrowers and Hellbenders,
Yep.
which I didn't realize. And the other one, Akila Cooper, is actually on the top watch list right now for screenwriters because they've done so many big name things. They've got Megan and Megan 2, The Nun 2, currently writing for Star Trek Strange New Worlds, American Horror Story, Luke Cage, the Grimm TV show, Hellfest. They are up and coming into becoming one of the next big screenwriters. You can see them slowly rising through the ranks of what they've done. And then to get this and be on board with James Wan, I can easily see Atomic Monster picking them up as a regular. And it keeps me interested in what James Wan's going to do now with Atomic Monster.
Mm-hmm.
But it also worries me now that they're partnered with Bloomhouse because it could go one of two ways. It can either be bringing up Bloomhouse, or Bloomhouse might bring them down. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, but if James Wan starts doing more of this stuff compared to the like 16th Conjuring or Insidious movie, uh I will be happy, because I do love his movies. I do enjoy them. There's just so many of them at this point. It's
So, the thing is, he's both a successful producer and a director. Uh,
director, writer, actor, all of the above.
well, writing wise, I think for most of his early career, he was with Lee Winnell. So I kind of
Hmm.
lean toward Lee Winnell with a lot of his earlier stuff, who I think is a great writer and now becoming a great director in his own right. Thank God. I like the fact that he's produced a lot of different stuff. Like, even though, and it keeps the quality up. Like, even though he's
Yes.
not directing all of the Insidious movies, the quality of those films are still
Hmm.
at a peak. It's the same with the Conjuring sequels and the spin-offs. He's brought in a lot of people he's met,
Yes.
and allowing them to direct these films for the first time. And I'm seeing him foster a lot of great new talent, kind of like what Jason Blum does.
Hmm.
So I'm really hoping that putting these two powerhouses together is going to create even more um, films that are not only driven by a director's passion for the genre, but also creating a lot more opportunities for creating bigger and better films. Depends. Jason Blum is starting to get more mainstream with all his Exorcist and Halloween movies and shit. I wish he would step away from that, but I can understand the money aspects and people flashing money in front of your eyes and saying, I could here do something with Halloween, make it better. And I can say, me as a filmmaker, like, fuck yeah, I can make it better. I saw Halloween 6. Holy shit, yeah, I could definitely make that better. Or Exorcist. Yeah, I saw the last 4 Exorcist movies. Yes, I could definitely make some better shit than that crap. I can see why he does it. I don't see why he did a Firestarter remake. But I can understand those two.
Yeah, it's just interesting. I definitely saw Atomic Monsters like butting heads, so now them becoming one conglomerate thing. I feel like it might take away a little from the horror community, because uh Bloomhouse now is very much doing revamps, sequels, prequels,
Mhm.
remakes of the originals, where a lot of Atomic Monster was semi-original content that then proceeded to become series of films, uh, which most of them start really well. Like The Conjuring, I had to turn off the first time I watched it because I was terrified. Once it gets to like movie 3 or 4, gets a little wishy-washy of like, okay, I know where it's going. Like The Nun really creeps me out. The Nun movie didn't like. Uh
Yeah, we had that discussion. You hate the no movies, and I love.
I don't like jump scare movies. I find them very predictable, and I find them very to be very cheaply made scares. Um like when you have to rely on a scare cord and something popping out at you, that's like riding the Haunted Mansion ride at Disney. If I want to feel terror, I want to feel terror. I don't want something popping out at me that just looks disgusting or gruesome or scary. I want to be sitting on the edge of my seat, and I want to be afraid when I go to bed that night. Um,
So I'm putting the Nun movies on the list because we've had this discussion before, not on the show, where you hate the jump scare movies, and I think the Nun movies are like the epitome of having the best version of a jump scare. I agree with you 100%. They're all jump scares, but I think that they're the best example of how to do a jump scare, and I think they're very effective that way.
oh no, see, after recently seeing Longlegs, I think some of those are some of the most effective jump scares that shouldn't actually even be scary.
Hmm.
The way that it is, and I can't wait to talk to you about that when that is finally done with you.
Yeah,
And
I'll see it, and
yeah,
maybe we'll do a
because
special episode.
I would love to. I need to see that again. But no, my friend made me watch The Nun and Annabelle because she loves all of James Wan's movies, and she very much watches all of the bad horror movies. Because she'll just watch all of them. Uh And so like we'll take turns. Like I'll show her like one of my favorites and she shows me one of hers. And right now The Nun 2 was one of her favorites. So we watched a lot of those.
Oh, shit. I like the Nun too. too.
It's just one of those things where I don't like being able to call the jump scares every time. Like I know there's those wide shots where like you're expecting something to happen and nothing happens and that tension builds. But then when you're like, oh, there's going to be a face around that corner, and then there's a face around the corner, and you're like, okay, well, somebody's going to pop out of the closet, and somebody pops out of the closet. I'm like, okay, this is just predictable.
Yes. Oh, that's a different story for a James Wan film because he didn't direct those movies, but they are
Yeah.
spin-offs from his franchise.
His, yeah.
Uh,
But
the
yes,
yes, and the Nun 2 was successful, and I hope that they do a Nun 3 to finish off another trilogy with like the Annabelle trilogy. And they just
which I
need,
think we're getting another one too, aren't we? I think they just announced another Annabelle movie.
I don't know. They are definitely doing the final Conjuring Part 4. They are not
Yes.
done with doing spin-offs. I do know that. So I don't know if they have announced any official spin-offs. But considering that the Nun franchise is extremely financially successful, I would not be surprised if they try and do a third one. But despite the way that second one ended, I'd see a hard way of just doing another one, just to just lead into the Conjuring movie and let that be it. It'd be interesting to see how they would do a third one there. But there, after Annabelle, the third one, Annabelle Comes Home, like you have a plethora of stories that you can pull
Yeah.
from for spin-offs, and I'm waiting to see what they come up with next. So,
Which they are. They're doing The Crooked Man.
oh yeah, that's right. I heard
So
about the
that'll
Chris.
be, I mean, he's got his fingers in a bunch of stuff right now, which is going to be very interesting. I think we talked about it a few weeks ago, The Last Train to New York, which is the remake of
Train to Busan.
Train to Busan. He's got a couple of Blumhouse projects, New Line, Lee Cronin, Mortal Kombat 2.
Which I think is finished now. I think they finished shooting it now.
I think so. He was also a producer on Salem's Lot, which we're waiting for the release. And then they just
Holy,
finished filming The Monkey,
yeah.
which is based on the Stephen King short story. So I'm interested to see what he does because he is an excellent producer, having somebody who worked in horror film becoming a film producer generally produces good effects.
Okay, so
So
because I just went to the rabbit hole for James Wan, I did not realize that there are approximately 25 films that he's associated with right now.
yes.
Some of them are already in post production, some of them are in production, some are in pre production.
Yeah, I think by the end of 2025, we're going to have a good chunk of films from him. And then I think I just saw that he was also directing The Call of Cthulhu.
Really? Someone's finally
Yeah.
going to try and tackle that? That
I
would be
mean,
amazing.
with everybody going to not necessarily having live action, but not a cartoon movie, where they
Hmm.
can have those adult animated films like where we got what was it, Scanner Darkly and stuff
Hmm.
like that. I know Guillermo del Toro was looking at doing In the Mountains of Madness, which is very hard to do real, but if you're going to do it like Love, Death and Robots style, where you
Hmm.
get all the different kinds of animation, I think you'll be able to pull something like that off a little bit more.
I think so too, especially considering that Guillermo del Toro is at that point where he's saying he's only going to focus on animated films. I think that because his ideals are so vast, um,
Yes.
and they require such a big budget that moving it towards darker animation is probably a good idea. Although I hate to say, I still have not seen his Pinocchio yet.
I haven't either, and I feel really bad because I've loved everything that he's
Hmm.
put out. I know he was doing Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, number two,
Yep.
and then I think he was talking about doing a version of Frankenstein because, after we get our three Draculas in the next 2 years, they're then going to do a bunch of Frankensteins as well. Um, but I mean, his Cabinet of Curiosities was brilliant. I thought Nightmare Alley was a great return to gothic horror, which he does very well.
He just
Um,
I wish they do another season of Cabinet of Curiosities, but it seems to be like a one season off and that's it.
Yeah, well, I mean, and you look at these people who are on that and how they explode after you
Mm.
realize what they've done. And it goes back to that whole doing the smaller projects to then pay for the passion project, and that's where you get a lot of those directors. Um, but I think the strain recently was being built up again for something. I've noticed it in a lot of
Yeah,
media.
I noticed that too, and I don't know why. I thought it was really weird that I was hearing so much about that. I was like, huh. But
But yeah, I mean, I love everything he does. I will go and see whatever he produces, puts out. I know he's very big into the kids animation stuff now too.
mhm.
Um, apparently he's producing an untitled werewolf western project, which I am 100% here for. Uh, but yeah, I mean, we're gonna see a lot of big stuff.
So, with that, any final thoughts about *Malignant*? Because we delved into a lot of great
Yeah,
filmmakers as we were going from James Wan to Guillermo del Toro.
gonna have to cut this episode down just a little bit.
No, that's the great thing about our conversations. They can go wherever they want to go, and the things about our listeners are they get a bigger insight on each of us as our as hosts, and what our likes and dislikes are, so that when they're listening to other conversations, they know exactly what to expect. So, or not to expect.
Yeah.
But any final words from you on *Malignant*?
Uh, for those who have not seen it, go in expecting a insane movie. Like I said, it's very what the fuck just all around. And those who did not appreciate it the first time and thought it was too much, go in with some fresh eyes and see if you enjoy it better this time.
Uh, thank you for that one. So my thing is this. I think that the people who enjoy the odd horror movies, the ones that you will watch over and over again, and I'm going to reference some pretty famous ones and not so famous ones, such as Evil Dead 2, Shaun of the Dead, even John Carpenter's The Thing, or Big Trouble in Little China. These movies, which did poorly at the box office, but have become huge cult classics because of the types of movies that they are, the types of genre bending they are, the types of stories and characters are what people gravitated towards. I believe that *Malignant* is one of those type of films that once you watch it and you understand what you're watching and you watch it repeatedly, you'll see something different and you'll enjoy it each and every time. I don't know how many times I've seen Big Trouble in Little China or Evil Dead 2, and it doesn't matter. It never gets old. I rewatch them over and over and over again. They're just great movies. And James Wan's *Malignant* is like that for me now. I did not like it the first time I saw it. I absolutely think it's brilliant now. I think James Wan is a underappreciated filmmaker. I will say filmmaker because he's not just a writer, producer, or director. He's someone who goes out of his way to help foster newer talents with a lot of the sequels and to his spin-offs and movies and such. And I think that he is a force to be reckoned with in the genre. He's probably the only successful horror film director who has multiple different franchises going at the exact same time between
That
the
are
Saw
all
movies.
successful too.
Yes, between the Saw franchise, the Insidious franchise, the Conjuring franchise. I don't think there's another filmmaker with this many franchises that are successful and can still doing sequels as we speak. Um, so going into *Malignant*, you should keep this all in mind because it will enhance your enjoyment of the film, not only now, but in time. I think that 10, 15, 20 years from now, you'll still be talking about *Malignant* like we still talk about *Evil Dead 2* and *Army of Darkness*. Those are movies that probably should never work, but they absolutely fucking do. And that's why we keep watching them. So with that, I want to thank Fanazl for joining me on talking about *Malignant*, and I'm so glad we were able to finally get around to this conversation. Everyone out there, please check out some of our previous episodes. We will get to more James Wan films because I just realized we have not done many for the podcast yet. So we will fix that for future reference. Check out our sister show, Conversations in Four Color, which is only on our Patreon supported only page. It delves into reviews on comic books, manga, and graphic novels. Make sure to check us out on Spotify and all the major podcast apps out there. If you can't find it there, go to YouTube. We're on YouTube too. So with that, I hope you have a pleasant day. Check us out, and we'll be waiting for you on the next episode. Have a good day. Conversations in Horror is a Broken Lighthouse Pictures production, produced by Kevin L. Powers, executive produced by Kelly A. Inoka, and originally filmed via Zoom technology. Conversations in Horror is hosted by Kevin L. Powers and co-hosted by various horror film lovers and filmmakers. To learn more about Mr. Powers, please make sure to check out his Patreon page and other social media platforms. Conversations in Horror is copyright 2024 Broken Lighthouse Pictures production.